can keep admitting people, that would be great. Hello, everyone. Welcome to ACPA 2022 International Colloquium, hosted by ACPA Commission for Global Dimension of Student Development.
Strange. Okay, unmute. Oh, here we go.
Everybody with me, okay? Great. So my name is Katie, and I am an assistant professor in the Department of Counseling and Human Development at University of Georgia. I am serving the Global Commission as a faculty in residence, and it's an honor and pleasure to moderate today's session. So let's turn to the next slide. The 2022 International Colloquium topic is Reimagining Social Justice in the International Community, Intersectionality Beyond Intersecting Identities. And today we invited three wonderful international scholar speakers to talk about intersecting identities of international faculty, challenges, and well-being. Each speaker will discuss how their multiple identities impact their experiences living and working and surviving in the U.S. higher education institution. So before we move on, I want to briefly talk about who we are. ACPA, American College of Personnel Association, and Commission for Global Dimension of Student Development brings, I don't see my screen, sorry. Okay. The CGDSD brings together ACPA members from all functional areas interested in cross-cultural learning, development of intercultural competencies, internationalization, and student services around the world. The Commission also serves as a home for international members, including ACPA members living and working outside of the US, as well as foreign-born ACPA members living and working in the US. So if you want to learn more about our commission, please stay connected. If you visit this link, then you will hear more about who we are. Certificate of completion will be given to those who attend our 2022 International Colloquium at least 3 sessions. So please still stay until the end of the webinar so that you can learn more about the certificate of completion. Relate to ACPA's mission of supporting and fostering learning through the generation and sharing of knowledge, and ACPA's strategic imperative for racial justice and decolonization, our commission would like to acknowledge the indigenous land that each of us occupies today. Thus, we would like to invite everyone to acknowledge the ancestral homelands they are physically situated in today. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced removal from the territory, and we honor and respect the many diverse indigenous peoples still connected to this land on which we gather. So today, we acknowledge the practice of settler colonialism within the US and uplift Native perspectives into our ways of thinking. So please check out this website to identify the local Native tribes that you are currently situated. So if Pretty can drop this website, it will be really appreciated. So finally, let's introduce ourselves. So please introduce yourself in the chat box with the following items like name, your pronouns, where you are currently located, the tribe names that you are on if you know those, and then your position and your current institution/organization. If you can share your info in the chat, then it will be highly appreciated so that we know who you are. So today we have 3 wonderful speakers, and I would like to invite them to introduce themselves with the alphabetical order. So Dr. An, can you begin the introduction, and Dr. Hassan and Dr. Nia. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Soyeon An. I'm professor of social studies education right here at Kennesaw State University, which is like the first unceded land of the Muskogee and Cherokee land. I'm mother of 2 children growing up at Georgia Public School, originally coming from South Korea. I'm going to talk more about who I am, because our topic is about the intersectional identity and how that informs what we do and what we dream for. So I'll stop it over here, hand it over to now our next speaker,
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I'm Abla Hassan. I'm an American Syrian professor of practice of Arabic language and culture at Nebraska University. I teach Arabic language courses and I teach courses on Arabic culture and Islamic culture offered in English. I teach women in the Quran. I teach love in the Arabic culture, love and sexuality in the Arabic culture, sex and gender around the globe. I'm the author of Decoding the Egalitarianism of the Quran and the author of On Pain and Suffering, a Quranic Perspective, both published by Lexington. I'm a mother of 3 boys.
All right, and welcome everyone. My name is Gudrun Yunt. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am an assistant professor of higher education and student affairs at Northern Illinois University. Joining you today, the homelands of the Potawatomi, the Ojibwe, Ottawa, as well as the Sacs and Fox, the Kickapoo, the Peori, Miamia, and Sioux. And what else can I tell you about me? I have 1 child and I'm pregnant with my 2nd, and I'll talk more about that actually as part of my presentation, but I've been a faculty member for 4 years now and excited to be joining all of you.
Thank you all for your introduction. So now each speaker will discuss how their identities impact their experiences, challenges, and well-being as international faculty. So after each speaker's presentation, we'll have Q&A and discussion session for about last 10 minutes. Dr. An, are you ready?
Sure. Hi, everyone. As I briefly shared, I'm here calling in from Atlanta, Georgia, right here. So I'm more interested in about the question that you have. So what I have just a quick 3 slide about just briefly situating myself with this big idea about intersectionality and how identity informs me as an international scholar and students in US higher education. So I'm talking briefly, although we have a multiple hats, right? Multiple identity intersecting together. I was given a charge about talking more about my identity as a non-native English speaker. So in order to talk about this, my life story, right? Originally coming from South Korea, which means then I was native Korean speaking student, and also I was middle school, high school teachers in South Korea. So a language was not even an issue for me. I was happy to speak in my own language almost for more than 27 years in Korea, until I came to United States 2003 as an international doctoral student at University of Wisconsin Madison, and my area is a social studies education, right? So I didn't know that, right? I should have chosen because I'm not a minority Asian as maybe if I did choose a math or a science, maybe less struggle, but I chose because I was social studies teacher without knowing that how language and culture would be huge challenge for me as an international student. So that has been challenging. I can talk more about it when we get to that part. So after about 6 or 7 years as a doc student, my first job was in Illinois, small liberal arts college in Augustana College. And again, during my doctoral study, I was as an international student, non-native speaker. I wasn't given an opportunity to teach as a teaching assistant. So I never trained as a teacher educator. Mostly my work I got a research assistantship. So I was trained to be a researcher. But then my first job was teaching college, right? During that time, American economic depression, there was not many job opportunity. So I wasn't expecting to landed on a job that teaching is the main focus. So for my first 2 years, that has been such a huge struggle. I can also can go to my soapbox, right? Writing down every single lesson, a scripting 3 hours of lecture, scripting and memorizing before actually teaching. And a lot of tears, right? During after teaching when I was reflecting. So after 2 years, I came down to Georgia because of my family situation. My husband's already living in Georgia. Because of his job with a newborn baby. So we had to get together. So since then, 2011, more than 10 years, I'm here at Kennesaw State University. Similar to Augustana College, KSU is also a teaching heavy university. Then again, right, the teaching and serving, that has been a huge challenge. So throughout this whole my life story that, as a non-native speaker in US higher education, reading, writing, publishing, speaking, teaching, or taking a leadership role as a non-native English speaker has been such a huge challenge. Dr. Koo, can you go to next slide? So for me, like the things that, did a big, like a catchy phrase that kind of for me to like recover from this trauma and struggle is that the idea that like if someone is speaking to you in a foreign accent, they are smart enough to know at least 2 languages and were brave enough to do their job in their second. So this statement becomes like a huge for me to keep going. And also I'm using this one as actually a teachable moment when I'm teaching and when I'm interacting with my students who see me as, oh my God, is she even smart? Like, with that broken accent. So I'm using this statement as for my teaching or my interaction with my colleagues in like my research field or the leadership or the community service field. And then along with that, the idea that like moving, we need to pass beyond the deficit thinking. We need to move toward asset-based approach, whether it's a teaching or serving or learning, right? So this like, my positionality or our positionality as an international student or a scholar, as a non-native speaker, that is not even actually deficit. Actually, our positionality asset. There's so much that we can inform and then transform and contribute the U.S. higher education. So next slide, please. So then I didn't get to here where I am now when I'm thinking of my, like, of course, during my international student age, right, my student years, but even my junior scholar year, I wasn't like operating with this idea, but right now as a senior scholar and teacher educator, I call out and educate actually native speaker privilege to my students and my colleagues. And then like, the danger of a deficit view of the non-native speaker. I speak up in my own setting, speaking up and demanding equity in faculty and student support, international faculty and student support at the department, college and university level. For example, proofreading services, it should be like a free, right? It should be given for the international faculty. So we cannot use our own money like with a little amount of salary. When it comes to student evaluation or faculty tenure and promotion evaluation, we need to speak up and demand that we are not operating in the level playing field. And then for us, like, in a sense, we are minoritized, right? We are in this hierarchy when it comes to the language differential. So we need to, I'm working with other groups, right? The minoritized group to build a cross-group solidarity for collective struggle. Because once, when nobody's free, then I'm not free, but I can only be free when everyone's free. And using actually our positionality as a non-native speaker and international scholar as actually asset for our teaching, research, and service. So I'll stop it over here, and then I'm more than happy to talk about all my soapbox and like all the challenges, but also like the things that the tools that I found are working, at least for me.
Thank you, Dr. An, for sharing your experiences and insight. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about your stories later for our discussion session. So now I will invite Dr. Hassan to talk about and share her experiences. And let me stop the share screen here.
Thank you so much. So today I was invited to share about my identity as someone who comes from a religious minority background, and the way this impacted my personal interact with others and even my academic life. And I'd like to start by quizzing all of you, maybe asking you the question that you don't have really to respond to. Just kidding. If you can guess my religion like in 2 seconds. And of course, I'm guessing, I'm just kidding, because you don't even need to guess it or to second guess it. And of course, I'm practicing Muslim woman. But the reason I'm asking this question is to give you an idea of how to live a life when your religious background can be guessed in less than 2 seconds, right? So a huge impact, of course. I'm a practicing Muslim woman. hijab, which is the headscarf, which I'm wearing, is a visual and a social public announcement, I would say, not only of my religion, which is Islam, but of my commitment to this religion. This doesn't happen all the time. This doesn't happen with every religion, right? To have it socially and publicly shared upfront, right? So two things to be considered here. First, to have a religious or a religious background, which is something we all share, right? And second, to have it publicly shared and publicly announced, to have it publicly shared with he or she who is at the end of the communication, both visual or written, because I have my profile picture with hijab also on my email, which I choose to go with. And the other thing is to go with that upfront and before you know.
I was able to find out to figure out some more of the course information for the CIE students.
Should I go ahead, Kate?
Yes, please.
Okay. And second is to have it, I mean, your religious background as someone who comes from a religious minority, to have it shared upfront and before you know the attitude of he or she and their idea about your religion. So you're choosing to choose, I would say, a set of beliefs, or to say it differently, you're choosing to choose yourself first, right? Now, Muslims are already a religious minority in the US. This is no secret. Islam is highly and increasingly misunderstood and problematized in the US. This is no secret as well. But to put the two things together, I mean, to have an already controversial and questionable religious identity, and then to have it publicly announced, that requires a high level of commitment towards one's beliefs and a sophisticated level, I would say, of tolerance with others' misunderstandings, questions, ignorance, or even sometimes others' prejudices at times, right? Unfortunately, Muslim women, and to be more specific, veiled Muslim women, I always argue, are turning, increasingly turning to become the minority of the minority. Let's remember that headscarf is not only a question from outsiders, it's not a question from outsiders anymore, but it's turning to become a question or a debated topic per se. While some Muslims and while some Muslim women and scholars consider hijab as a religious duty and a feminist affirmation of the right to body ownership, some liberal voices from within, even from within Islam, question the same concept of hijab and whether Muslim women today should commit themselves to hijab anymore. However, recognizing all these convoluted levels of problems shouldn't distract us from recognizing the choice to Islamic modesty as a choice like any other choice. It comes with consequences. But my question is, what choice doesn't come with consequences anyway, right? As human beings, I don't believe there is any act we do or decision we take that can be described as a consequence-free choice, right? We choose all the time. We choose even when we choose not to choose, right? And we live with the consequences of our choices. And this applies to all of us, right? But what matters is not the act of choosing, because we do it all the time, it's inevitable. What matters is the fact or the merit of your choice. So because you pay a price no matter what. So at least I believe personally, choose to pay a price to what you believe in, not to what others believe in or what you pretend to believe in. Now, here's the dilemma of our social communication. We live in a diverse world. We're all different in all aspects, and we should all be different in all aspects. because this is the way we can enrich each other's lives. This is the way we can contribute. But at the same time, we struggle to fit in. Love and acceptance are what all human beings struggle to achieve. The question now is how to be honest to your beliefs, to yourself, while communicating or connecting deeply with the other. We do want people to be close to us, but without losing the boundaries, right? We do need to hear others' voices, but we don't want that to distract that from listening to the inner voice, authentic voice inside each of us. And the key to that, as I take it, and this is number one question in our modern world, how to be different, but then still work closely together and fit with each other closely together. The key to that, as I understand it, is to start from understanding your authentic self, start from full acceptance of yourself, because only those who unconditionally accept themselves can unconditionally accept others and can understand others. Now, is it difficult and challenging to represent a religious minority? Sure, but who said it's going to be easy anyway? This is what you sign in the minute you choose yourself. I don't deny challenges, but at the same time, as a veiled Muslim woman, I don't walk around thinking of problems or looking after problems either. As a Muslim woman in academia, I should admit I had my own share of troubles, but the question is who didn't have their own share of troubles as well, right? Anyway, sometimes resilience turns to become what defines us as human beings. Now, we can choose to whine and complain, but at the same time, we can choose to move forward and stay focused. Internalizing hardship doesn't make it sound or feel better. Adopting the victim mentality doesn't liberate you. It can only distract you from rethinking your inner power, your resources. I've never thought of myself, to be honest with all of you, as different. I always believed that communicating with the other starts with the simple things. It's our meal together. It's talking about weather. It's our kids playing together. It's our second project together. This is what matters. What's else about my experience? There's an alarming rise of Islamophobia in the West, right? This is a reality, in media particularly. But there is also a promising, growing sense of shared responsibility to turn our world into a better place to all of us. Interfaith dialogues, globalization of education, language and culture courses, community involvement are only some of the ways I try to adapt and successfully we adopted in the Arabic Studies program here at Nebraska University to turn our students and to help our students fit into the globalized world and turn into good and ideal citizens of our global community. To share a little bit from my a very positive and rewarding experience here in Lincoln, Nebraska, I've been invited to so many churches to speak about my religion, to respond to questions. I'm so grateful to that. I was in partnership with First Plymouth Church here, a wonderful community. The support, I would say, from community, from colleagues, even from random people and strangers is overwhelming. You get hugs at times of crises in the street. I had people approaching me saying salam, which is hi in Arabic, saying it in Arabic. I had students taking first year Arabic with me and telling me the reason they took these courses is just to be able to say hi to immigrants in their own languages. This is an overwhelming experience. Credit to one of my students, Matt, who goes with his Arabic name Yahya as well. I was overwhelmed when he shared with me the reason he's studying Arabic, because Lincoln, Nebraska is an immigrant and refugee center. So there are a lot of people working in person with immigrants the minute they arrive the US. Even now, we're celebrating the sacred, the holy month of Ramadan now, where Muslims fast, so from sunrise to sunset. Kids try to prove their adulthood by fasting as well. When I reach out to I have 3 boys in 3 different schools in Lincoln Public Schools. When I reach out with emails to staff and teachers to explain, they respond with such warm welcoming with questions. How can we help? We totally understand. We're going to send them to the library instead of like time for hard activities. But what else can we do? So it's positive, and I would say it's time now. It's the right time now to open to the other, to be able to do what we need to do, to be open first about our flaws and mistakes, and then to be able to meet the other with open hearts and welcoming hearts. Is it easy? I won't say it's easy, but it's important because it's not easy. It's the time. It's the time for it. It's the time to write the narrative. Difficulties are not difficulties. Difficulties are opportunities. They allow you to write your narrative. So a short answer to the question I was invited to share today. Is it easy to represent the minority of the minority in the US? I'm not going to say it's easy, but is it rewarding? Yes, I'm enjoying it, and I'm enjoying every minute of it. And thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity today to share my experience with you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hassan. And well, we appreciate your very insightful sharing and those very powerful experiences. I know that there are lots of thoughts and reflections going on here in this room, but let's hold it for our discussion session for later. And if you have any lingering questions or thoughts, please write it down so that we can share it later. Our next speaker is Dr. Nayat from the Northern Illinois University. Please welcome.
All right, do you want to share the screen again, Katie? So I figured I'll start by telling you a little bit more about myself, right? And so I came to the United States when I was 18 years old as an international student. I grew up in Austria. And so I first got my bachelor's degree in journalism at the State University of New York at New Paltz. And then, while I was there, to be honest, right, I obviously benefited from white privilege in many ways, though I wasn't aware of it at the time. And so I didn't really think about my international identity that much. It was easy for me to make friends with other domestic students. I had done an exchange year in high school, and so I was speaking English relatively well. I still, had an accent, and people sometimes pointed it out, and I got the question of like, where are you from? But then often, right, when I shared that I was from Austria, they were like, oh, this is so cool, right? Like, tell me more. So in general, I was pretty oblivious to my international status and what that meant during my undergraduate years. And then decided, right, I got involved on campus. So I decided to go into higher education and student affairs, get a master's degree. And that trend kind of continued of me not really thinking about myself as an international student. I wasn't really connected to the international community. I had no interest in really focusing on, that part of my identity or working with other international students. Until really I started job searching, right? And as I was finishing my master's in job searching, my international identity became really salient to me because I went into all these hurdles, right? Of trying to figure out how am I going to get sponsorship? What am I going to do? And didn't really have that support network, right? Of having maybe other international students or knowing international faculty or staff who could help me navigate that. And so that's really when I became more, I guess, aware of my international identity, right? And what that meant. And that trend continued throughout my career. I worked in student affairs for 7 years before I got my PhD. And every time, right, I was job searching, it was rough because there was all these extra immigration challenges that I kind of had to navigate and go through. I ended up, so in terms of immigration, right, you can be on an H-1B for 6 years. And before that, I worked on an OPT, and those are lots of different, right, kind of acronyms and specific immigration policies that are not really that important to get the point of the story. But basically my time on like a regular temporary work visa ran out. And so I was, my last employer was trying to sponsor me for a green card, and realized they couldn't. And so after that, I was kind of like, what do I do? And so I ended up going into my PhD a little bit, of course, because I was interested in it, right? And it was my plan to do that down the road eventually. But the timing was really very much determined by needing to find another way to stay in the US and kind of continue in this career. I ended up getting married during my PhD to an Asian American man, which I got a green card through him. And so that has sometimes led to some interesting dynamics when people meet us, because the assumption is always that he got the green card through me since I'm white, right? Versus the other way around, which is what the reality is. But that really resolved a lot of kind of my job searching issues. And so after graduation from my PhD, I started as a visiting assistant professor at Northern Illinois University. And then after a couple of years, switched over to the tenure track. And so I'm now in my 4th year. Halfway through my 1st year, I got pregnant. So my daughter was born in October during my 2nd year at NIU. She's now about 2.5 years old. And I'm currently pregnant with my 2nd child. And our due date is in June. Dr. Koo, if you want to go to the next slide. And I share all this background, right, just to kind of set the scene of like what my experiences have been like, and how all of these different identities of being international, but being from Austria. So, looking white, being European, being a mother, being a faculty member, having worked in student affairs, how all of that kind of shapes my experiences. And I'll focus particularly on the parent part, but how those other intersecting identities shape that. And so thinking about parenting, right, in many ways, it was another thing that really, for me, brought cultural differences to the forefront. Obviously, Austria is a lot closer to the United States, right, than many other cultures, but there's still some really big differences in how we raise children. And so being a parent, I became aware of those a lot more, right? And some of the things are around letting your child, walk around on their own. Like in Austria, I mean, and some things have changed since I was little, right? But I was probably like 7 years old when my parents said, yeah, you can, walk to the bus stop by yourself and get on a bus and go to school. And if you don't want to take the bus, you can walk. It was a 30-minute walk, and I would walk that. It wasn't a big deal, right? Or I would ride my bike to school, and that was fine. Versus in the US, where there are these expectations, right? Or sometimes even laws. In Illinois, I know you can't leave your kid alone until they're 11 years old, right? And so that obviously, those are some cultural differences, right, around how we deal with children or how we think about children. There's things around how school districts are set up, right? That coming from Austria, and my husband as an Asian American immigrant, similarly, right, knows little about. And so we had to really figure out, like, what does that mean when we bought a house? Like, why do we have to think about a school district, and how do we think about that? What do we look for, right? Whereas in Austria, where you just choose which school you want your kid to go to when they're ready to go to school. The other thing, right, and this is where, again, the international kind of status intersected with being a parent, is the lack of family support, right? That family was far away, or in general is far away for me. And so my parents aren't able to come that often. And then during COVID, right, we also had extra travel bans. So my parents saw my daughter when she was like 4 or 5 months old, and then weren't able to come back for almost 2 years, right, until those travel bans were lifted. There's also cultural expectations around, raising your child on your own, rather than sending them to daycare, right? Like my friends in Austria look at me a little funny when I'm like, well, I'm gonna have to send the kid to daycare, right? Really early on, because I have to go back to work. And so that leads into some of those structural issues, right, that exist in our society around lack of support for faculty mothers or mothers in general, right? And how that intersects with international identities and other identities that make those challenges even harder to overcome, right? And so some of those challenges are daycare hours that don't align with the times that we often have to work as faculty. In my program, a lot of our classes are taught in the late afternoon, evenings. My daycare closes at 5:30, right? So that doesn't work. There's sometimes unrealistic work expectations, right, around I think some studies have found that faculty work on average 60 hours per week. That's not realistic when you have children, right? I can't work 60 hours a week. For one, daycare is not open for 60 hours a week. I also have a household, right? And I want to spend time with my children. And so a lot of times there's the struggle around mom guilt, right? Of feeling like I'm not being a good enough mom. I'm also not being a good enough colleague and faculty member. And really kind of struggling, right, with how to navigate that. And I think sometimes, right, being Austrian, and there's that perception of Austrians as aggressive or rude. So when I try to kind of advocate for myself at work and try to negotiate, I tend to do that in a more direct way than probably white US Americans would, right? And so that's sometimes seen as a negative thing among my colleagues, because they expect me, right, to kind of use that fluffy, to me it seems fluffy, but the language, right, that Americans tend to use, or that's more common in American society. Other structural issues, right, are around the lack of parental leave in this country, which I'm sure many of you are aware of, right? Which again, being international, there isn't that ability, and not everyone, right, who's American has that ability either, but there definitely isn't that ability, right, to kind of say, hey, my family's gonna come and stay with us and help raise my kid. And there's also, right, what's sometimes hard too is seeing those comparisons to my friends back home, who would take like a year or up to 3 years off from work, right? And most of that paid at least partially. So usually the first year is paid, right, in Austria, and then the following years are paid partially if you want to take up to 3 years off. The ability to work part-time, right? Like there's lots and lots of jobs that are set up in Europe, and there's more and more opportunities coming up to work part-time and do so and still advance in your career. Versus here, if I want to be a faculty member, right, I have to work full-time. Like I don't really, especially on the tenure track, right, I don't really have a choice. I can be an adjunct and teach a couple of classes and not get paid a lot and not really go anywhere with my career, but so I have to make that choice, right? And it feels like in some other countries, there's more of that ability to really work through and not necessarily have to make some of those tough choices. Obviously, as I already mentioned, right, COVID-19 kind of exacerbated a lot of that. We've all heard lots of stories, right, about parents struggling during COVID with working late, with keeping your kids at home, right, because we were all worried about them contracting the virus, but then not knowing how to kind of balance the work that we needed to do with having children at home. Obviously, being international, as I mentioned, travel bans, right, increased some of those challenges because now parents definitely, or grandparents definitely couldn't come to visit anymore. Right, there's also been interruptions with daycares, right? You send your kid and then one day you get the phone call, there was a COVID exposure. And so daycare is going to be closed for the next 2 weeks and you're all supposed to quarantine. And so, right, there's been lots of these disruptions, which very much, right, all of these intersecting identities, all of these structural barriers, I would say have impacted my well-being and likely, right, the well-being of many other faculty mothers, and especially international faculty mothers. I'd say for myself, right, I've noticed in terms of physical and mental health, just exhaustion, the guilt, as I talked about, right, of not being a good enough mom, of not being a good enough faculty member, sometimes a little bit of regret of like, why did I do this to myself, of coming to this country when I could be back in Austria, and still be on parental leave from having my first kid now that I'm, about to have my second one. I think there's also social wellness issues, right? It is more challenging, at least for me, it's been more challenging to connect with others. I think sometimes the international status, right, separates me from other US mothers because there's certain issues that I face that they can't relate to, right? And then motherhood also separates you from other colleagues and international colleagues who don't have children, right? And so it's kind of, unless there's another international faculty member who is a mother, you don't have anyone who has those same kind of connections and experiences. And then even, right, obviously international is a really broad category. And so the diversity among international faculty can create additional kind of barriers, right, and silos. And so being Austrian, there's not a ton of Austrians that are in the United States in higher education, right? So I'm usually the only one. And so there are those cultural differences where I'm like, nobody else can really fully understand that, right? Of what that's like. I think in terms of intellectual and occupational wellness, right? I've definitely seen impacts just of never feeling like I can truly live up to my potential, never feeling like I can do enough for work based on others' expectations. And so, yeah, I think there's been all of these impacts over the past couple of years. Dr. Koo, if you could go to the next slide. And so I want to end briefly with some of the things, right, that have helped me manage some of these challenges and barriers that I've talked about. And so obviously, my husband, my daughter, right, they've been my biggest supporters. Well, more my husband. My daughter's a little bit young to do much of that. But there's also finding community, right? And so I think for me, I have to find those different communities, right? I have some support networks around international faculty, some other international faculty mothers that I know, right, at my institutions, at other institutions, the larger community of international faculty mothers or student affairs mothers, and there's some really active, right, Facebook groups that can provide some of that support. I think it's been really helpful to find some allies amongst colleagues who've been helping me, right, if I bring up some of those structural barriers or challenges and supporting me in doing that, and supporting me in just speaking up about this. And then also organizations, right, like ACPA that helped me connect not only with colleagues, but that are also really trying to push us to think critically around what working in higher education in the 21st century should look like, and how we need to think through all these intersecting identities and how they're impacting people's experiences in our field and how we can better support individuals as human beings. And so those are some of the things, right, that have really been helpful to me in navigating these journeys. And so that's the end of my presentation. So I will turn it back over to Dr. Koo.
Thank you, Gudrun, for sharing your experiences. Working for 60 hours per week is definitely not possible for mothers and professors. All right, so let me stop sharing the screen. So I'd like to open up the floor for discussions and Q&A. Before we get into the questions from the audience, I was wondering how speakers feel about being here in this space and time and share your experiences that you really didn't share much to other colleagues. What have you had this opportunity? Have you had this space and time to share very candid, very honest experiences that you have had because of your multiple identities as international faculty, as a mother, as from the person, from the religious background, and with the accent, multiple layers and layers of identities. So what do you think? How you feel? You don't have to be shy.
I can go. Thank you, Dr. Koo. That's why I think I'm so thankful for Dr. Koo. I'm sure our all panelists and the participants in this room too. that this is one of the rare rare space where I can be just myself. I don't have to worry about my accent. I don't have to worry about the grammar that I'm using as a non-native speaker. It's one of the safe space, right? It's really rare in our wherever we are as a student, international student or the international scholar. So right now in my university setting, like I think I'm one of the two, the international scholar in my department in college-wise. And then even like we as an international scholar, but also like our identity intersects, right? I want to be participating and building a coalition with the faculty of color, but then before we raise our voices, like, the faculty of color, the meeting was that meant in our college meant like, the Americans, right? Especially the African-American faculty. And that is the faculty of color. We were not even invited. So it has been like a challenging within even my own setting. But then as we talk about today, like an allyship, building the like a really safe, like a supporting network, we didn't even if it's limited. So for me, like this space, like, although we never seen physically, but yeah, I feel safe, same as in my university, in order to survive, to keep my sanity and not support each other. Like, so I have a like close relationship with like international scholar in my college. So throughout this whole pandemic, like we could only survive, right? Because of like I know that like there's other faculty there who feel the same with this whole language issue, the like a legal citizenship issue, and so many other cultural the challenges that we face from our teaching or work. So yeah, Dr. Ku, thank you. This is one of the rare, right? Like our humanity and our struggle is affirmed and valued and also recognized. So thank you so much.
Sure, we could have a part 2 of the session. Maybe after a year, maybe next year, Colloquium. And when Gudrun has second baby, and then she might share more stories of working less than 20 or 30 hours per week. I'm just very exaggerating. So any other reactions or thoughts about you being able to share your experiences for today?
Also, I can say I'm so grateful, Kate, for the invitation to share about my experience, about our experiences. I've learned a lot from the other panelists as well. And Gudrun, as a mother of 3 boys myself, I was able to relate to everything you shared with us. You're a great mom, and being outside, doing, being in public, having this responsibility is what makes you think of yourself as a unique mom, as a great mom. When you mentioned the mom guilt, this is something we all share. Please stay away from it, because you're already doing awesome and great. And I'm grateful for the opportunity, Kate, for like to organize such a panel to address like what's unique about our individual experiences. Because as I mentioned in my experience, we just struggle to fit, but we're still different. So you're celebrating both aspects today. Thank you for doing that.
Sure, thank you. So we have 2 questions from the audience. So we'd like to visit that. So the first question, is there a fear of losing one's cultural self if one's accent becomes too Americanized? Very interesting. What do you think?
I think it's probably really depends on the person, right? And how you feel about your culture and how you kind of relate to that culture. I think for me, I always strove to kind of lose my accent and try to fit in, which also probably says something, right, about my own identity development and this want to fit in and not, always get the question of, no, where are you really from? I think I've noticed it more when I go back home, right? So if I visit family and friends back in Austria, and then they'll say, when you speak German, you have an American accent. And I lose it once I stay in Austria for a little bit longer. But there are some like phrases and things that, when I say things now in German that come off really awkward. And so that's the part where then suddenly you're like, oh, so I don't, even if I wanted to go back to Austria, like, I don't fit in there anymore because I've changed now and I think about things differently and I speak differently. And yeah, so I think there is a little bit that like that feeling of like, now you don't fit in either culture 100%.
I think for me, like my accent will never be too Americanized. It's not gonna happen in my lifetime. So that's totally okay with me. And even if like a too Americanized, but still like I don't think that is for me it's an exclusive. And because of the identity is so flexible, like what does it mean? Because as a person from South Korea, what does it mean being a Korean immigrant or Korean migrant or Korean settler in this settler nation? Because we all define who we are as our cultural identity is different. Like my identity as a Korean is different from how my spouse define his Korean identity. So I don't think it's I'm worrying about like just being as a migrant settler in the United States. The more I live here, then the less that I become more, I lose my cultural identity. I don't see that as a struggle kind of thing. For me, with this whole the accent or the language and linguicism is about like the power and oppression, right? Like people see like still English dominant, English hegemony, and thinking about those not speaking English correct way, using that as like a weapon to oppress or the discriminate that group. That is my struggle. So actually, I'm using my the accentism, right? That as one of the example, I can use that as for me actually asset to educate, because I'm teacher educator. My students are a future elementary school teacher, and they will have in their classroom, of course, students and parents who are not like a non-native English speaker. Actually, so using myself, my position and my identity, my experience as actually helping my students to see right how you can affirm and like the support all children in your class, all parents in your classroom, so then their diversity, their difference, and their personality is from them valued and appreciated.
I can add to that as a teacher of Arabic as well. Like losing the rest of your accent is impossible. It's the curse of second language acquisition. It's okay. It's part of your identity as long as it doesn't interrupt with or doesn't prevent right communication. So as long as people can understand you. And I can share with you something I always share with my American students who learn Arabic. It's very cute. Like when Arabs listen to Americans speaking Arabic with accent, they don't take it as a flaw. They take it as very cute, unique. So it's beautiful. It's part of your identity. I had once a gentleman here in Lincoln. He's super nice. He approached me with saying, please don't lose the rest of your accent. And I was like, you don't have to worry about it. I have enough accent for the rest of my life. But yeah, it's very cute. Like native speakers, especially in the Arab world, I would say, when they hear Americans or people from Europe trying to speak Arabic, they take it as you're trying to reach out to us. You're trying to understand us. You don't have to, but you're doing your best. They like it. They like it. Sometimes we post videos bragging about our students here at Nebraska taking Arabic. Everyone would like to watch those videos and get inspired by that.
Thank you all for your answers. Those are very helpful, very insightful. I'm aware of the time. We have only 4 more minutes and we have 2 more questions to address. So let's try our best to visit. So another question, can any of the speakers share their experience of how they managed to navigate times they were feeling nostalgic, homesick during their studies or recently? So how do you manage your feelings of those homesick? Do you eat your home food? Do you watch the TV from your country? What is your own remedy?
For me, K-drama.
Same here. In K-music, K-food.
Same here, Syrian drama, watching Syrian drama.
I think for me, some of it is also just connecting with friends back home, right? I have some friends from high school, and so I'll chat with them and kind of connect with them, which also helps get over homesickness.
I think we are a really much better in position compared to like our 40 mother, father, and our generation. Like I hear about like, you know, like in my father's generation, those who came over for their like a temporary they stay for study or work, whatever. If back in the day, 1970, my father-in-law, he shared like he need to record in cassette tape about, because he had my husband and then my husband's the older brother, like they were like a 2-year-old or 3-year-old. They hold a hostage in South Korea because they didn't want the Korean people leave. The Korean government didn't want the Korean people leave Korea. So anyhow, so the parents and the children are separated in 1970. So they need to record like a record in there. Hey boys, you know, we miss you. And then they not through the airplane, it's through the ship. So it took like more than a month or 2 months to actually like, so those conversations. But compared to that generation, our generation, we can do instant like a FaceTime, you know, the messaging, like a virtual, like a conversation. So I'm connecting with my parents, aging parents back in Korea, and my parents are seeing their grandchildren growing up in the United States. Although it's not equal at all, like actually physically together, but that's, you know, the best we can do at this time.
Technology helps with the homesick. So I'm aware of the time. We only have 1 minute left. So panelists, if you can look at the chat box, there is one more question in terms of the professional connection. While you are reading it, and then if you can answer to that question through the chat box, it will be really appreciated. And let me wrap up the session really quickly. So as you attend to this session, this is a 3rd session out of 4 for the International Colloquium. And if you attend 3 sessions and more, you are eligible to get the certificate of the completion. So if Kriti can share the link to sign up for the certificate of completion, it will be really appreciated. So after the session, there's one more session left. And I saw that Kriti also shared that info. So it will be next, it will be 2 weeks from now. It's April 28th. And then we'll talk about the 3rd quarter and in-betweeners. So it's 1 p.m. Thank you all for coming, and thank you all for being here and the Support International Colloquium. And I would like to thank all 3 wonderful speakers and scholars who shared their wonderful experiences, very powerful and very insightful. Thank you so much. So as you exit from this meeting, please remember that ACPA offers a lot of great resources here, and Kriti shared that resources here. So please visit those links if you want to learn more about the session and also want to learn more about our commission. Thank you all for coming, and let's give a huge applause to our wonderful speakers. Thank you all. Have a great, wonderful afternoon of Friday. I will see you in the 4th session in 2 weeks. Bye. Thank you.